As the Trump administration releases a new AI action plan and the Carney government itself goes about designing its policy related to artificial intelligence, we want to ask the question today, how should we think about the opportunities and challenges represented by AI? And I can't think of anyone better to talk about that with than Samuel Hammond, the chief economist at the Foundation for American Innovation, and someone we've previously spoken to at the Hub on these issues of innovation, technology, and economic dynamism. Sam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start with the Trump administration's AI action plan, something that you've called a quote, giant leap in the right direction. What is it and why do you like it?
Yeah, so this is the White House's first unveiling of their strategy to quote unquote dominate AI vis-a-vis China and the rest of the world. It lays out a ambitious, multi-pronged strategy to win on AI infrastructure, to build many data centers and the energy generation needed to power those data centers, to review regulatory barriers that hinder AI's development, and then to export American technology around the world, all while doing other things around AI for science, biosecurity, risk mitigation, but not letting that risk framework dominate its vision, focusing on the positives and the upside.
In that vein, help us understand how you think about the Trump administration's approach to AI and how it differs from, say, the Biden administration's approach.
Yeah, so the Biden administration had their own executive order. It was very risk averse. It was focused on minimizing, the ability for the federal government itself to adopt AI. It was focused on regulating the leading companies based on size of their training compute, and really had it's not that there was no good ideas in the Biden executive order, but it was a purely reactive. Let's try to keep the lid on this sort of approach. Whereas I think the Trump administration is recognizing that the genie is out of the bottle, and whatever you think about AI, it is going to be the most important technology of the century. And so we need to proactively master the technology, not think we can put it back in the bottle.
Your commentary on the Trump administration's AI action plan addresses what you characterize as issues around American values and free speech. Talk about how the action plan addresses those issues and why you think they're important.
Yeah, they're sort of downstream from winning an AI per se. So there are really two, in the geopolitical level, actors racing in AI right now. It's the United States and China. But then you also have the European Union, which is racing on trying to be the regulator for the world of AI.
Yes.
And ultimately, you export your regulation by exporting your technology. And the administration is very worried about a repeat of the Digital Belt and Road initiatives, where suddenly the Panama Canal and every other country has Huawei equipment installed. And so how do we use our first mover advantage to make sure we export the U.S. technology stack, the full stack, so that other countries around the world are reaping the benefits of U.S. technology, and thereby also adopting our standards and values.
And you'll know that in recent days, Vice President Vance spoke at an event hosted by the All In podcast on some of these issues. He expressed a pro-innovation, pro-technology point of view along the lines reflected in the action plan, but he also acknowledged some potential problems that policymakers need to be prepared to address. And I want to just raise a couple with you and get your point of view as our audience and indeed myself try to work through them. The first is what I've come to think about, Sam, as a epistemological question, and that is, in a world of increasing zero click-through searches where AIs aren't merely helping users access information, but are indeed playing a key role in mediating between the user and that knowledge and information. How should we think about the potential risks of granting them such tremendous power in what we think and ultimately know?
Oh, that's a great McLuhanite style question. There are ways in which AI could be a negative and positive in this. So on the one hand, there's also concerns about AI girlfriends and, this new phenomena of AI psychosis. These systems are very human-like, and their ability to sort of reflect human agency and intelligence can be very intoxicating, and it's easy to forget that there's not a ghost in the machine. On the other hand, there's potential salutary benefits of large language models and frontier AI systems to reverse and fix some of the downsides that we had at the social media era, where it's less about a fight for your attention, and more about potentially having an AI agent that is summarizing your social media, summarizing the news, and just feeding you what you need to know, and sort of working on your behalf. And so I think part of this comes down to the concept of defensive acceleration. Can we accelerate the good pro-human defensive forms of AI, where maybe the D in defensive acceleration should be dating life in the case of AI girlfriends, but more broadly, like these are things that we're going to have to choose, and public policy could potentially help, but it's also such a fast-moving area.
Um, on the subject of zero click-through searches, you're starting to see commentary from media and other internet sources that AI risks undermining web traffic and in turn revenues for those organizations. Is there a risk that AI effectively risks cannibalizing the knowledge and information online that it needs to produce analysis and commentary for users?
Yes and no. Early on, with the release of the earliest coding AIs, Stack Overflow and sites where people used to go to get coding questions and answers, basically saw a huge collapse in traffic. But like, it's a sort of, from my point of view, that's a kind of woe is me story. We always have new models. I remember the fights with Amazon and the publishers and the
Yes.
bookstores. And so we're going to have creative destruction and new ways of consuming and receiving information. There's going to be maybe the typical TSN sports article will be written by an AI because it's not a piece of literary fiction, but people are still going to value human created goods and services, and there's a world for those two things to coexist.
I want to come back to your earlier observations about the AI race between the U.S. and China. Where do you score things right now?
I think the U.S. is leading, but it's a tenuous lead. Partly because
Mm.
China has a kind of tortoise in the hare approach to this race, where AI only has leadership in AI only has a few core inputs. It's the data, it's the algorithms, it's
Yes.
the hardware, and it's the energy. And on data, China is probably a peer with us, but arguably they have a longer term advantage because they don't have privacy laws. They have huge centralized databases. On the hardware is where the U.S. has a real advantage. We have NVIDIA, we have the biggest cloud data centers, but that's a lead that could quickly slip away, in part because of the energy bottlenecks. So China added over 400 gigawatts to their grid last year. They're adding similar numbers this year. Their sheer ability to build an energy and transmission infrastructure means that in the long run, but for export controls on their access to advanced GPUs, they could easily leapfrog us. And so that's something we need to pay very close attention to.
We're starting to see. I asked about an arms race, an AI race between the U.S. and China. We're starting to see one amongst American-based companies. How should we understand, in broad terms, the different AI technologies, and do you have a sense of which ones are most likely to dominate the market?
Yeah, it's a great question. Is there room in the market for more than one frontier lab? Right now there's three or four, potentially five, depending on how you count. And one of the striking things that we've seen with these models is just the sheer degree of convergence between their
Yes.
capabilities. So all the benchmarks are being saturated, but the models themselves are also quite similar. People have minor, personality preferences, but there's actually good reason for this. Like, there's research showing that there's in some sense one best way to be a reasoning language model, and these models all converge on that. And so the question is, how do these companies secure real market advantage, or does the technology just commoditize and all the value flow to the NVIDIAs of the world or the infrastructure providers? And that's still an open question. I think what we're seeing happening is product taking a bigger focus. So OpenAI has potentially 500 million users, monthly users, and that's given them a huge revenue flywheel. And it's partly because they've innovated on the app itself, the memories that personalize the AI for you, and those kind of things could potentially give them lock-in.
Looking forward, Sam, talk a bit about some of the big developments that you're looking towards, say, over the next 12 or 24 months. This, as you said earlier, it's such a fast-moving technology with so many fast-moving applications. What does this world look like in the not too distant future?
Yeah, so these reasoning models that began coming out in fall of last year and really have taken off with O3 are really just the beginning of what you could think of as the agent or autonomy revolution. So, in some sense, we've had a kind of baby AGI, artificial general intelligence. It's we've had these systems that are incredibly knowledgeable, know a lot about everything, can maybe do most tasks on a one-shot basis, things that you can just do in a few a few steps. What researchers have been waiting for is when will reinforcement learning begin working in these models, techniques that give these models agency, the ability to perform tasks, to work over long horizons. And we're just starting to see the early signs of this working, and including scaling laws. So predictable laws about as you scale up the reinforcement learning, how much more autonomous and agentic do they become? There's a research outfit called Meter that has estimates of this that the duration of task that an AI can do is doubling roughly every 4 months. So today, if an AI can do a task that takes a half hour to an hour, in 4 months it'll be 2 hours, then 4 hours and 8 hours and so forth. And so within the next 18 months, and Jack Clark, co-founder of Anthropic, has said this in a recent congressional hearing, we should expect to see very powerful autonomous forms of AI, the sorts of systems that could reliably perform, jobs that take individual humans hours, uh, you know, extrapolating that out forward, jobs that could take humans days or weeks. And it's really a lot of the risk and a lot of the potential lie in that ability to have agents, things that can work autonomously, by the hundreds or thousands. And this is something that's going to come at us fast.
Final question. I, I am principally using AI tools for research. Sometimes I'm using it, Sam, as an alternative to conventional internet search. Sometimes I'm using it to create funny stories for my kids. As someone who's spending a lot of time in and around the technology, what are some of the most interesting or coolest usage or applications that you've encountered?
For myself personally, I'm not a programmer, so just being able to unlock that skill set has been enormous for me. I've used it to scrape all my old blog posts and put them all in one giant Google document. I've used it for email, for doing all kinds of little apps and projects. And so just having that at my fingertips has been the biggest unlock. And then, I think what I'm looking forward to with these agents is, people still haven't quite figured out like what becomes possible for one person. And I think there's going to be early adopters who start showing what becomes possible, but it is this sort of unexplored terrain. And I can't wait for a world where I have thousands of interns and executive assistants running around doing stuff for me. But I think that is going to become its own management issue.
Yes, indeed. Samuel Hammond, the chief economist at the Foundation for American Innovation. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us make some sense of some of these issues. We'll have to have you back on Hub Dialogue soon to do a deeper dive.
Thank you, Sean.